Welcome to the Jeff Knows Inc. Entrepreneurial Show with your host, Jeff Lopes.
We're live on the Jeff Knows Inc. podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Lopes. Super excited to have on today, Lawrence Lotze. What is up, brother?
Nothing much, man. Thanks for having me on my show. I'm over in New Zealand at the moment. My accent might sound weird to some of your audiences out there. And I'm a sort of a guy that I love my hats. And I'm so happy to see Jeff rocking one at the moment as well. I'm normally a straight peak sort of guy. But we over in New Zealand, we are enjoying our luxury of being in lockdown again. Major lockdown across the country. Jeff, here we go. To your audience, we went into nationwide lockdown, full lockdown. You can't leave your house other than for groceries or mental health exercise for one case. For one case in the country, we went into full lockdown. Just think about that for a second. So it's what are we going on 4 weeks? We're still in lockdown. So I had to wear my hat today because my hair's getting a little bit out of control, and I don't want to come on the show with sort of the African heritage of myself, the hair going out on the side.
I love it. There's three things I collect: hats, watches, and sneakers.
Yes, I tick box on the first two. I stay away from the third one. I don't know enough about sneakers, and I know as well that if I get as a sneakerhead, it's very much always been a sort of a legacy American things to be a sneakerhead. Obviously, Jordan brought out the Jordan 1s in the 90s, and every childhood that grew up through that was that moment, right? And now it's become so fashionable to become a sneakerhead. So to me, I'm like, no, stay away, stay away. Don't. My kids were massive space.
Somebody told me the hat is just a personal preference. Somebody told me I had this incredible business gentleman I became really, really close friends with, and he's actually passed away in the last few years. And he'd always said to me, this guy was all tatted, always wore a hat, always had a pair of jeans on, but would walk into a conference room or a business venture and just like, everybody could be on suits, and he would just walk in and he'd be the coolest guy in the room. Everybody wanted to be around him. And he always said to me, he goes, if you walk into a room, there's three things you need. He goes, you need a nice watch, a nice clean pair of sneakers, and confidence. And everybody in there will want to be around you. It doesn't matter if everybody's in suits, doesn't matter who they are. They'll all be surrounded around you. And I always took that to heart when he said it to me years and years back. And it's like, always nice shoes, always a nice watch, and just walk in like you own the room. And it's just that attraction, that magnetism almost, it just attracts people to you, right? So I love that. So there's so many layers to you. Few podcasts, business, some health issues we went through in the past. I want to start off just quickly going, where'd you grow up? Give me a little rundown about your childhood, and then let's get into, I guess, the last 4 or 5 years of your life. So start off, where'd you grow up, and let the audience know a little bit about your background.
So I'm South African born, born in Cape Town, South Africa, in the 80s, and was raised there up until my early 20s before I moved over to New Zealand. So I grew up through the release of Nelson Mandela, through the first elections in 1994. I remember growing up in that experience. So I had very few years that I can remember of actually being in apartheid itself. Obviously, my parents and my older sisters would have experienced all of apartheid. But I remember in 1994, one of the craziest experiences to me, and I can still vividly remember it, was the country had no realization, or a lot of people in the country had no idea what was going to happen next. So my parents went and sort of did that whole stock up and hoard. So we had 6 months of supply of food in our cupboards and our pantries, and water and tins like you wouldn't believe, in every hole and nook and cranny in the cupboards. In 1994, because we didn't know what would happen when Nelson Mandela came out and he was elected as president, if the country would fall apart. Fundamentally, it actually went complete the other way of him bringing it together with the rest of the world, right? And it was an amazing,
such a powerful experience, huh?
I truly was to have said I experienced it. I almost sometimes, most people don't wish to be older, but I almost wish that I was a couple of years older through the 90s, just that I could have felt and experienced more of that change in the world and South Africa itself. And then obviously, as I said, moved to New Zealand in 2007. So it's like almost 14 years.
What made you move to New Zealand? Work, career, school?
So up until in my teens and early 20s, I was really big in rugby sports. So it's sort of to any American, it's gridiron with no pads.
Yeah.
So
we're from Toronto. We're from Toronto. I'm from Toronto, Canada. We have, it's crazy. Is what are they called? We have a professional rugby team here that plays on an international level.
Yeah. So it's so they played this week against the USA Eagles for qualify for the World Cup. It's this week or next week,
which is crazy for a little Toronto team that has So and it's still they get no press here, like zero press here.
It's such a hard challenge. Like I know the USA Eagles. I think they're called the Eagles, and I'm mistaken if they're not called the Eagles. The USA Eagles team, a good few years ago, they had a pretty decent team. So what they did. They were really clever especially when I was going up through my teens. Like I said, I played top level. So I played rep and almost national level, 18, 20, and 21. And what the American colleges would do, they would come over to the three big nations. That would be South Africa, Australia, and New Zealand. Yeah. And they would find guys that were just below being signed on a contract and so forth. And they would say, okay, come over for a full scholarship over in the States. We'll give you full scholarship. And what I did was for the 3 or 4 years while this was going on, by the time I was sort of in my early 20s, the American team all of a sudden became like 60% American and about 40% Australian, New Zealand, very few New Zealanders, and mostly South Africans that came over and it took their game to that next level because they knew they needed some foreign imports to get the nationalization and then actually improve the team. And now the teams actually competes. USA competes, I think, top 30 in the world or top 20 in the world even at the moment. They go to most World Cups.
I'm from Toronto, Canada.
Yeah, I know. Canada's a different story, brother.
No, but we have a team from Toronto, Canada.
Yeah.
It plays at
so there's a whole lot of teams. There's a big professional league across all of America and stuff like that. I don't know the final details of exactly how they work, but it's exciting.
I'll give you I'll find out the details for him. But our team from Toronto, they play on a premier level.
Yep.
Yeah, which is crazy. Like they're playing in New Zealand all the time. They're barely ever playing here. They travel. They play everywhere else. But so obviously you had an inkling or a desire to turn pro. That didn't transpire.
Yeah, so I went as 18. I played in one of the top schools in South Africa and one of the top schools across the world for up at that stage. I went into varsity university for my first year, played 18 or under 19 varsity and so forth. Also loving the entertainment life and so forth. I found myself in South Africa, you can drink from the age of 18. So I started finding myself running and managing nightclubs and bars already from 18 to 19. So I got into a situation, I was really serious in my sport, but I was also working 16 hours with my varsity every single day. So I literally would work. I'll go to varsity, I'd go to work till 4 a.m., get about 3 hours sleep, and then do that whole cycle while trying to be serious in my sport. Yeah. So after about a year of this, I turned around to my parents. At that stage, it wasn't very common. And I said to them, hold on, something's going to break. I can't keep going like this. I want to take a year off. I want to take a year off from varsity and find myself. That was my parents didn't take it as well. Sort of the OE or the gap year or that sort of stuff wasn't as commonly accepted 20 years ago or 15, 20 years ago. But they acknowledged it. And my dad turned around to me and said, look here, I know if you take a year off and you stay in South Africa, you're just going to become lazy, sleep on the couch and play your sport, but not actually progress yourself further. Because your sport's why don't we look throughout the world and we send you overseas for a year into either Australia, New Zealand, or the UK, which is the big rugby nations in the world, and see if you can further your sport in that way. So as a 19-year-old, first time ever really leaving home other than a few holidays, I flew over to New Zealand alone and came and played in the top level club senior as a 19-year-old for a year. And that's what sort of introduced me into New Zealand, the culture, and everything else.
And the rest is history.
The rest is history.
I love it. Let's get into Lawrence as an entrepreneur. When did that venture start?
I think it started very young. I grew up in the household. My parents always pushed me to to drive to success. I spoke just recently on another podcast of sort of one of the biggest statements my dad always told me growing up was, you get the brand, the Ever Ready battery. And he said to me, you've always got to be like an Ever Ready battery. He said to me as a kid. And I said to him, what are you talking about being like a battery? And what he said to me is, you've got to always be ready at that moment in case someone gives you opportunity for what you're trying to achieve. So if you want to achieve the success in the sport, or if you want to achieve the success in the business, whatever you're doing, you've got to be at 120% ready at any one stage. So that meant growing up, I was always pushing the limit to find how far could I push the limits. So I always had a whole lot of different ideas growing up. At 14, I started the local tuck shop or lolly shop at my boarding school. At 14, I started running it out of my boarding school room. I had other people working for me, and I was making money, and I was making more money in like a week that, then 21-year-olds out of varsity were making, and I was a 14-year-old kid at school. And that sort of started that whole ball rolling of always looking for where there's an opportunity to take the next step in business and so forth.
I love it. So take us into, how old are you right now, Lawrence?
So let me think, 37.
37. You're still a young puppy. So when did you start with this whole coaching and the whole branding of the Wolf of Queen Street and all that stuff? Like, when did it all start?
So the Wolf of Queen Street podcast and the brand itself stood up in 2019. So obviously, not actually 2018 into 2019. Yeah. So it wasn't that long ago itself. But myself into a brand and everything else behind it, I spent years and years before that of going out and speaking to people and helping as much as I can. And finally came to a situation in that time period where people said, sort of in 2018, people were like, hey, you should look at starting a podcast and a brand and maybe do some coaching or some mentoring in certain sort of areas. Because I'm guessing same with yourself, Jeff, I can handle conversations no matter who I'm around or how big or how small you are in a corporate situation. I could always handle that really well. And 3 or 4 years ago, before COVID and podcasts became really trending, it wasn't as saturated. So you could go in there and build up a brand behind it. Most people 4 years ago only really knew about Joe Rogan and maybe 2 or 3 other podcasts in the world. So before I actually started my brand, I went and spent 6 months and started at episode number 1 of Joe Rogan. And I got about halfway through his entire catalog, listening to him every single day for 6 months, just to understand what he stood for, the brand, the guests, and everything else, to give me as much knowledge as I could before taking that next step. And I can imagine a lot of podcasters or social media brands wouldn't spend 6 months, 8 hours a day listening to someone before they actually took the first step.
Yeah, it's interesting you said that. I mean, I find there's 2 levels of podcasting. When I went into the journey of podcasting, I found you had your set podcasters where, I should say 3. There's ones that are very more educational based. And then you have your ones where they're very set, where the host will ask the same set questions or have set questions. And then you'll have the conversational ones, which are they're probably, now they're becoming more relevant, but at one point they're very small. And those are the ones like Joe Rogan that attract me, that conversation, a raw, just interaction where it's 2 people sitting at a dinner table having a conversation and people are just listening to it. Yep. And that attracted me to the whole podcasting, be able to have open conversation with somebody like you and just learning about you, talking, figuring out your space, figuring out what you do for a living, and understanding the whys and how you completed what your mission was. So having that all and being able to do that was something that attracted me. So I love the whole conversation, because Joe Rogan is literally amazing at it. He's amazing at his conversation. So I love that you did that. And I'm the opposite, man. I put something in my head, I just go. I learn as I go. I'll take my kicks along the way, but I'll just keep running and hopefully I'll make it through. So I love that you took those 6 months. So 6 months in.
Most of everything else, I'm always very aggressive very quickly. In this one, I think for some reason I was just like, hey, this is a little bit more of actually putting yourself out there. So that's why I listened back. But any other ideas, like most entrepreneurs, it's like, great. I was, a good few years ago, my late 20s, early 30s, literally every 6 months, I said to the wife, oh, I got a new idea. Let's start this company. No, I started multiple companies, some were success, some were failures. And, I went and did an online, myself and two business partners. We started an online appliance company, which in modern times, houseware appliance doesn't seem like anything weird. We started this 5 years ago in New Zealand, where there's only 5 million population, and everyone's like, hold on, you want me to buy a fridge and I can't see it? Like, you want me to buy an appliance, but I can't actually see it? And we went for 6 or 12 months. We did well, and we were like, hold on, we've got to spend money to grow it. And we just said we're not there. And literally 12 months later, all the retail stores across New Zealand just went online, and in the markets now, it's done.
Yeah. That's how business goes, Lawrence, right? You have your wins, your losses. Every successful entrepreneur has a shitload of losses. Mm-hmm. They hide away. They try not to talk about, and then you try to stack those wins higher, right? And you're hoping at the end of the day you have more wins than losses. Let's talk about your journey with your struggles, because there's obviously medical and stuff like that issues that we pass through your journey. Let's get into that. When did it all come about, and give me a little bit part of that story.
So a big thing to understand is, obviously, like I spoke about, I had this drive from a young age and always wanted to be successful, grew through my 20s. And a lot of what I did was I achieved the success. So all the goals I'd set out to be at 25, I hit. All my goals I set out to be at 30, I'd hit. And in this moment came up, people said, hey, you should do podcasting and listening to Joe Rogan as we spoke. So I started up this Wolf of Queen Street brand, like I said, into 2018, into 2019. And originally I was like, I want to be like Jordan Belfort. I want to be the success and the money and the sex and all of that comes with the glamour. So the original branding of it was me in a white suit standing in Vegas. And I was just like, yes, this is what's going to happen. So I started the brand under that whole, I want to seek Mount Everest of success just for myself and my family. And going through that moment, the brand and getting people on the show and, been a great experience. Life sort of turned a sort of an interesting curveball on me. Going into the beginning part of 2019, I had a very successful 2018. We traveled the world, was really good. And in the beginning part of 2019, I started feeling a bit flat. So I said to my wife, oh, maybe, we did too much in 2018 and, maybe the body's recovering. I'm getting my mid-30s. Most of my joints are, from sport injuries. The age is slowly starting to catch up to me. And after a couple of months, I still felt I'm not there. Something's wrong. I'm just not all good about it. And as males, we very rarely will put up a hand and acknowledge that there's something wrong. And we very rarely will go to a doctor. So, anyone out there, please take from my experience, go and get a checkup. So I quickly went over to my local GP and I said, can you just check up on me? Things just don't feel correct. And the GP did a test and came back and said, hey, Lawrence, we've found something in your results that, we're not sure about. The first thing is we found hormones in your body that don't exist in males. We also found hormones that only exist in pregnant females, and your levels over 5 times the level of a pregnant female. So we're not exactly sure what is going on here. So obviously I'm like, okay, in one small sense, here's the reason why I'm a little bit off, but in the other sense, I wasn't too sure what's going on. So this was April 2019. We're coming into the moment of finding that something's not right here. I get said to go to a specialist around that does the brain and the brainstem and everything else. And they said, normally what could cause this is a very small growth you get in around your brainstem that could trigger these effects. I first thought it was very weird when someone said to me, hey, there's this normal condition of something growing in your brain. But I was like, okay, I'll just take it as is. So the specialist said to me, Lawrence, go into an MRI scan a couple of days later, and then I'll see you in a week's time, and we'll see what happens from there, from that results. So on the Tuesday or Wednesday, when I went, my wife went with, we went and did the MRI scan. And an hour later, after the MRI scan, the doctor calls me and he goes, Lawrence, I don't want to see you in a week's time. I want to see you at 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. And it was at that moment, I always say, it gives me goosebumps every single time I say it, because I can remember it vividly. It was at that moment I had a realization of, and one of the many realizations of the following 12 months, that I know my life's never going to be the same. I know that tomorrow's never going to be the same. Next week's never going to be the same. And the end of the year is never going to be the same. So we went into my specialist the next 8 a.m. the next morning, walked in there, and he said, hey, we did a scan, found your brain. Wife had a bit of a laugh that I have brains. And the specialist turned around and said, hey, we found something. We find a growth, and it's large. It's as large as a golf ball. And it's encased around your pituitary gland, next to your optic nerve, and then right at the back around your carotid artery. It's literally just sitting there pushing on all these items. They said, look here, we've got to get in. We've got to get this sorted. It's not something you can leave and just keep going where it was at that moment. I had not known, due to it pushing on my optic nerve, I'd lost 30% of my sight. My peripheral vision, to anyone that understands peripheral vision, literally was just enclosing. The darkness was literally enclosing around me without me knowing this. When they tested me, I was within a week from legally not being able to drive because my sight was so bad. And over the next week, going in to see a brain surgeon, talking about it, a handful of weeks later, on the 26th of June, 2019, on my actual birthday, I went in and went in for brain surgery to remove this golf ball size brain tumor. Obviously, a success in some form. I'm sitting here right now. But that was just the starting moment of what my life has become today. Well, that's just the moment of my rebirth, as I call it, on my birthday. My birthday since then, I don't celebrate the day I was born. I celebrate the day that I was alive. And that happened there to remove this golf ball size tumor, there to remove my pituitary gland, which controls my hormones. So anyone that's understanding about that will understand what your body will go through, the fluctuations up and down that I had to learn over the couple of months after that. But the craziest moment, Jeff, and I'll go into at the moment was, this was 2-3 months afterwards. I was recovering, trying to figure out what was my new normality. Obviously, my hormones going up and down. Still to this day, there's days I can't get out of bed. There's days I'm a hothead like a 16-year-old. There's days I am down and depressed, and there's just nothing I can do about it. So after my surgery, I was trying to figure this out myself, what was going on, and being very proud and successful. All of a sudden, the chips just chopped off my shoulder. And then being self-employed, the money's not coming in as much. So 3 months, 4 months, money's not coming in because I'm recovering at home. So I call up my insurance provider and say, hey, I've been paying my insurance for 10 years. At that stage, I've had the surgery. I know I've got my insurance. I left a good few months because I'm like, hey, I'm not going to pressurize them in the beginning. I know they're going to pay out. Got this big payout expectation to pay for me to cover my income and anything going forward. And then the insurance company turned around to me and said, yes, Lawrence, you've been paying us for 10 years. You've got insurance. I said, great. Can we push the green light and I get my payment? And they turned around and said, sorry, no. What you have and what you went through doesn't meet our requirements to pay your payout. And I still have, and I've got it, the email that actually officially came back from my insurance provider. And there's two lines, got it highlighted in an email, and it's something I look at. And there's the two clauses they found out, or they got out of paying me, was the following. In New Zealand, we're very advanced in our medical practice in certain things. The old way of doing brain surgery was actually going through the skull, cutting the skull open and going in. I'd spoken to a lot of people through my network that they went through the same surgery and they've got all, gone cut up on the side. They actually did the total recall with me. They went right up the nose and did the surgery from in there. So the one clause in the insurance was, you've got to go through the skull for brain surgery for it actually to pay out. Any other way doesn't count. And then the second one, which makes me laugh because I have to laugh, otherwise I just get angry, is they said, "Oh, you're healthy enough and you've recovered, so we're not going to pay you as well." And I got a letter from my specialist, surgeon, and everything else to show that, hold on, I've lost my control of my hormones. I take meds for the rest of my life. If I get into a car accident or any trauma, my body was shut down instantly. About 9 months after my surgery, I went and had a tattoo just to the remembrance of what I went through. And my whole body shut down within 3 hours because my body can't produce hormones to fight any challenges. And the banks, my insurance company, which was through my banks, telling me, "You're healthy enough, you're going to make it through." So then, that was, again, another hard moment. Then going, I got no income coming in. I haven't got the protection I thought I had, because 6 months before I was blowing all the cash we had and everything else. I had all the investments, but just spending it all. And it came to the beginning part of February 2020, which is actually not so far long ago. I bounced on a mortgage. I was a very, very large amount of money in the hole, bounced on a mortgage, and I couldn't see where I could pay my bills. I couldn't see where I was going to pay my bills in 30 days' time, how I was going to afford my kids' school fees. And also at that moment, which is pretty much the darkest moment in my life of not being able to see financially from this big success person I was, where I was going to go next. Me and my wife, because I had changed so much and wouldn't really acknowledge and accept it as males do, no longer were seen eye to eye. We became two different people I became a different person from when we got married. So we had to come out in the same month publicly to our friends and go, "We don't think we're going to be married anymore. We don't think we can get through this because our relationship's no longer based on the same, things that we were and the love and everything else." So sort of the real darkest moment of me hitting the bottom of financial ruin, loss of marriage, and everything else, just sitting there in the dark and not knowing where to go next.
How long ago was this all?
That was February 2020.
So this is very recent.
Yeah.
Are you officially separated with your wife? Or are you guys still?
No. So no, we still together. We still together. We're very much in love and work through it.
We'll talk about that in a sec. Hold that thought. Yeah. I want to talk about in North America. I'll talk about Canada. I've heard so many horror stories on insurances like that. And I had really probably one of my only real childhood friends in his early 30s, 33, passed away with a brain tumor. He was obviously not as fortunate, and it happened so quickly. He was at work. It was a Thursday. He passed out at work. They rushed him to the ER. They found the tumor, and by the following Tuesday, they found it was stage 4, and it was the size. It was the size of a pretty much a softball, or almost like a baseball at that point. And he was around for another 5-6 months. So it was but he fought with his insurance, and insurance was trying to refuse to pay for the chemo. And we went through all this, and I saw all this, and it's just a lot of people just sign and start doing their insurance and pay and think they're going to be covered and everything's great. And then when shit hits the fan, they don't realize. So it's very important for people to read the dotted line, to ask the questions. Yep. And that goes with anything in life, is ask the questions and make sure they are all answered properly and in writing. So if life does happen, you're not stuck in a situation like Lawrence and stuck in your darkest moments alone, because insurance should be there to help you. You put your trust in them, right? So I think that's very valid. So when did it turn around with your wife?
So in February 2020, like I said, in that moment, I talk about it sort of in the darkest moment there was still a little glimmer I could make out. And I talked to a lot of people. I'd seen that if you're willing, you will still see a small light at the end of the dark tunnel. And there was a little bit of a light there. So I had my personal challenges as well as my career and financial challenges. And I seeked out, or actually begged, a couple of companies that I'm still part of today to take me out on the business side and figure out how I can take the next steps around my mortgages and investments and everything else. But on the wife side of things, once we finally came out, it was that first acknowledgement of, hey, there is an actual problem. And then we could sit down and discuss and talk about it. And one of the biggest things was, because I'd become a different person, my reactions were different. Like I said, I've always been a little bit hot-headedness as a kid, aggro as a teenager, and this sort of came back into my life. So I was losing it at my wife and at my kids and being very aggressive just for no reasons. So once I could say, okay, I'm gonna agree to my wife at that moment, there's something wrong. Let's implement some rules so we can try and figure it out. And one of the biggest things, and one of the most simple things is we built in a safe word. And what the safe word fundamentally meant between myself and my wife was, because she knew I would get triggered, or I felt something was just going to let me blow, if any one of us said the safe word, no matter what was going on, we had to stop and we had to walk away from the situation. So if I was going and my wife could feel that I was going to lose it for some reason because something was pushing it, she would drop the safe word and I would hear it and acknowledge and then walk away or go do something else. And we had to break that reaction in both ways. And the craziness was, when this started, we're like, okay, cool. I said to myself, oh, okay, we'll do this a couple of times a week. It might come up. And it was literally 3, 4, 5 times a day in the beginning. The safe word had to be used.
It's crazy. And the triggers, huh?
Yeah, and the triggers, and this is where the realization was of how much of a pain I really was being at that time, because I had a realization of, holy crap, my wife today had to tell me 5 times to stop and walk away because I was getting out of hand. And from being able to do that, there was a slow realization of, okay, trying to pay attention and learning how I am as a different person, and slowly going down from 3 to 4 times a day to 1 to twice to, every couple of days, and be able to turn back that whole, misalignment of myself, was be able to bring back to, where we are and where we originally were. Don't get me wrong, there's still days we butt heads because I still have troubles controlling myself and not realizing that. But we had to spend 3 or 4 months working through it exceptionally hard to get to learn who the new me was. And I think that was one of the hardest things for my wife, was the man she had married at that stage. Oh, would have been 2007. So 12, 13 years at that stage, all of a sudden was a different person. So it was more working through and that, going, okay, we're going to work at it, and now almost having to learn and love a new person to the person you were just 6 months ago or 12 months ago, and working through that consistently. And like I said, we still have the challenges. We just have to both be open to take criticism and in a positive way, so that we can still pivot when need be.
Yeah, I think every relationship, no relationship is perfect. Anybody that says their relationship is perfect is full of shit, right? And understanding that everything's a work in progress. Mm-hmm. I think the most important thing with keeping a relationship strong is asking the right questions.
Yep. And
being open to listening. I think a lot of people, especially once you have children, especially if you have young children, mm-hmm. they become your priority. And then all of a sudden you forget that you started that relationship before those children came along, mm-hmm. and you don't put enough love or attention to that relationship. And what happens is you start focusing on the kids, dance, sports, and it's just go, 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 go. Mm-hmm. Life's busy, businesses, and you forget about that, and you become numb. And over time, that numbness just continues and continues, and you slowly start falling apart without even realizing it.
Yep.
And it's very important. One thing me and my wife do is, at least 5 times a week, usually Monday to Friday. Our kids we're a little lucky. Our kids are a little older and they're very independent. But when the kids are going down, we'll literally go for a power walk together every single night. And it's about a 30-minute walk, but it's our time to communicate and talk and ask how the day was and how it came in, and just reconnect just on a mental aspect, which I think is so important, to ask questions and ask how she was, or as she'll ask me how I was, or how the day was, or do you have any issues, and being able to have that open communication is so valuable, even if it's for half an hour a day or 20 minutes a day. But I think it's something that a lot of people don't do. They just become very numb, and that numbness ends up just slowly drifting apart. And before you realize it, you feel like there's no coming back. And a lot of people won't even give the effort to come back, because nowadays it feels like you always hear those, like your parents, your grandparents. I mean, they would through thick and thin stick together. Nowadays, you breathe the wrong way, and people are like, divorce. In Canada, I think it's 4 out of every 6 or 3 out of every 5 marriages within the first 5 years end up in divorce.
It's crazy.
It's crazy.
And COVID didn't help.
My parents, you're aware, my dad has recently passed away, and my parents, my mom met my dad when she was 13, and they were together till my mom just turned 70. So you're looking at 56 years, 51 years married. My dad took early retirement at 55. My mom was 50 years old, and they both took early retirement because financially they had enough put a bank and they just wanted to enjoy life. And my dad had a really good pension. And for the last almost 25 years of their life, they were never apart one day. And they're always together, always happy. And if they could have that relationship and being together 24/7, anybody could do it. It's just being able to communicate and appreciate each other. And so I love that. So how many children do you have?
2.
How old are they?
So my daughter turns 13. She's counting it down on the 26th of September. So it depends when the episode comes out. She's doing 13. And my son turns 10 a month later. So sort of get into the trouble.
So you're very close to my son's 13. My daughter just turned 15.
Yeah.
So it's a fun age, right? They're very independent. They as a parent, like, I don't know how you are, but we from a very young age taught our kids how to be independent. I think we talked about this before. Like, my kids cook, clean, do everything. So it's such a I love seeing that they have that independence, to lock the doors, put on their alarms, like they could do stuff for themselves, they fend for themselves. So it just allows you to have that, so you could take a step back and now have that freedom. My kids come here on weekends and help me work, and they pack and they receive and do stuff. And I think it's such a fun age to see them develop and grow and turn into young adults and all that. What does fatherhood mean to you?
I think originally fatherhood meant to become a better person for myself. But to me now, when your kid's 2 and 3 and 4, it's, hey, look, me getting better self, because it's still a little person that's not really speaking or understanding. But now, my daughter that's almost 13 and my son that's almost 10, it's about trying to make sure that I've given them everything so they can be the best person or best type of person they're going to grow up to be. It's no more what they can offer to me. No, don't get me wrong, my kids teach me stuff every single day, and my daughter's started a gaming channel, and her YouTube channel is larger than mine, and she's been doing it since she was 8. And is
that a little jealousy here there?
Yeah, a little jealousy, right? But it's more in the sense of, to me, fatherhood is just being able to give them the experiences that all kids deserve, and the moments, and fundamentally just make sure that they feel loved and make sure that they feel special. We all live such crazy and busy lives, depending where we are, and sometimes we forget that. And there's moments. Jeff, how old did you say your daughter was? 15, right? So you don't get those kisses and cuddles as much as you used to.
We do though.
Do you?
I do though, yeah.
So my daughter's slowly starting to transition away from it, but there's moments.
Our kids are very like one thing we are is very open in the way where it's like we go to bed and everybody's like, hey, I love you, dad, and every morning they give it. My son's a lot more affectionate than my daughter, and that's just his nature. My son's, I call my son my little. When I get home, it's my son and my dog having a battle to come to who could be at the first, see me at the front door the first, right? So it's my son's a very affectionate kid, and it's maybe because everything he's been through, and because he was so cuddled and protected when he was a baby, all the difficulties he went through, I overprotected him. But I think that has just turned him into this sweet, loving, like he will not go to bed without coming to give you a hug and a kiss. When he wakes up, the first thing he does is have to go to your bedroom to give you a hug and a kiss. He's just a very affectionate kid. And sometimes in the middle of the day, like during the summer break, he would call me and I'm like, what's up, T? And he's like, no, I just wanted to say hi, Dad, and to make sure you're okay. Like, he's just a sweet kid. My daughter is more she's more the entrepreneur, more the independent, more the hustler. but she still has affection still. I mean, we've kind of pushed that from day one. So, but you'll see it. I do agree. You do see it as she becomes a teen. And she's like, she'll walk ahead of us in the mall now, and she wants her space. I get it, right?
Yeah. So, those moments that my daughter, I was slowly starting to transition to, but there's still those cute moments where she'll come over and just give me a kiss and a cuddle. And, any dad that still gets a kiss and cuddle from their teenage daughter would never say no and take it. Yeah. And that's great, to me as a father, is to say there's still that bond and everything else. I know in a couple of years' time, my daughter won't even go in the same mall with me because she knows that I prank and do silly stuff. So she won't want to be seen around me, because I'm the sort of person that will go in a sumo suit just walking down the mall just to embarrass her. We're lucky that we're out in the countryside and we don't go into the big malls and things like that quite often because, I've got no shame.
I dropped my daughter at school the other day, and with COVID protocol, all the kids are lined up outside, and they have to, when they walk in, they have to show a pass saying they either they passed their test or they're vaccinated every single day. So there's literally like thousands of kids all huddled together. I'm like, really, COVID protocol, huddled together, and they're all trying to get in. So I drop her off in front of the school, and she goes, and she's going to go to her friends. And I roll down the window and go, "Bye, Sierra. I love you. Have a good day. Make sure you're home on time." And she's putting her head down and walking so quick, like, "Oh God, Dad." But you have to have those fun moments, right? That's just those are all the things she's going to remember one day when you're not around, right? Those little quirky parts of you. Let's talk about one more thing, and then I'm going to ask you a couple questions and to finish off today. Wolf of Wall Street, Jordan Belfort, that was obviously inspiration of yours. The branding has changed a bit, but it's still very powerful. Where is the branding going now, and where's your mindset with personal branding?
Yes. So like I said, originally when I started, it was all about success and money and what I can achieve for myself. And obviously going through that scare that I went through and all that realization, there was a massive pivot of going, hold on, I don't want anyone else ever to go through that. Yeah. I don't want anyone else to ever to experience that, to have that struggles of not being able to put food on the table or pay a bill or pay a mortgage and everything else. So my brand pivoted quite drastically sort of from the beginning to where it is now, where it's more, it's a platform now. The branding's changed, the direction's changed, and it's more platform to inspire and educate people specifically around property and business space, mostly around the New Zealand, Australian market and a little bit of the wider world. In New Zealand, we have one of the most expensive property markets in the world. Yeah. Our average house price across the country has just gone over $700,000 US for an average house in this country. Just think about that, right? The average house price across the whole country. So a lot of people don't have the opportunity to get into investments from property and stuff. So my brand now is getting the best in the market to come out and speak to people on the show and to provide that education. And also something that I'm sort of calling out in sort of my marketing tactic at the moment is I'm a place where I give away free knowledge and education with no expectation. I'm sick and tired. Look, I get people have to run a business, but I'm also sick and tired that the person that hasn't got the right education, because high schools don't give us the right future education, now has to go to a company and pay for that company to tell them what they should have learned and so forth. Yeah. So I drive a lot of my brand around that people can come over and learn, the insights about investing in property and shares and so forth, not just from myself, but from my guests, learning skills around business and startup companies and how to do social media and all that stuff that's in there. And at the end of the day, there's never going to be me standing there and going, "Hey, by the way, make sure you pay me for mentorship, or make sure you buy this through that company." There's none of that expectation. So it's purely driven to improve others and inspire others, compared to originally I started to make myself money and be famous.
Yeah, and I think that's a huge aspect of it. And I think our visions are very aligned in that path, because I've always had that mindset where you give not expecting back.
Yep.
And over time that all comes back in abundance to you, right? So it's just that mindset of just you don't expect, just give and give out of your heart and give out of your knowledge and your will. And over time, that will all come back. It might take longer, it might come right away, but it will come. And I love that. I love that aspect of what you're doing.
Yeah.
If something, sorry, go.
Sorry, Jeff, just to say, one of the things, if people, I know people that's going to be listening or watching at the moment, it's going to go, hold on, but how can you do this and spend all the time and have none of that expectations? Just, I obviously, as healthy as I can, I'm back into my day job that I do. I'm an IT contractor out there, something I love that I do as well. That sorts me out, and my other investments I got from a financial point of view. So everything I do this around my brand, as much as there's key parts around it, it's not driven to seek a revenue or business behind it. So that's where I can do that and speak out almost for nothing, because the stuff that I have on the side sort of puts food on my table now. And I think that's one of the big things, I think, with yourself as well, Jeff. Like I said, we're so closely aligned, was, your brand started not because you wanted to, do the 6-figure thing. Go, hey, I started a podcast and I'm making 6 figures from podcast. For me, that's not important. I know it's not important for yourself as well around your brand. And I thought I'll just let people know, the reasons why.
Yeah. And I think it's very important, if coaching or mentoring or podcasting, these fields are very competitive. Mm-hmm. They're very, very filled with a lot of bullshit and a lot of it's 100%. You have to call it, right? Yeah. Everybody's a coach. Mm-hmm. Everybody, like, you get guys where they're 20 years old and they're trying to coach and teach you how to do, and they've had no life experience. They have nothing. All they've done is they spend a shitload of money on marketing, and people think they're experts. And there's tons of them out there. There are these, and I laugh at it, because a lot of people look at me like, 26 years later is when I'm actually giving back now. Yeah. Right. And I think it's very important for people to understand, if that has a passion for you, where there's coaching or pocket, you still have to have those passive incomes. You still have to have those. You still have to have those backup plans to bring in the income to allow you to fully give to these other businesses or these other ventures with nothing, willing to go into it with no expectation of coming back. And then once you start doing that, then your brand starts growing, because authenticity comes across. Because if you're not authentic and you're just pushing it for the financial dollars, people can see that shit. Like, they can see that right across anything, right?
Correct. One of the biggest things, and it's funny, I've got a whole lot of brands. So obviously on my show, as Jeff would have, you'll talk about business. So we talk about an opportunity, and I'll talk about, hey, go to this company. I use them. I think they're great. And people go across, right? And I just say them because it's what I think is an option and so forth. And I've got multiple companies coming to me and going, Lawrence, you've mentioned us. We've taken on so many clients through your show and stuff. We want to, can we give you a revenue from anyone you refer us? And I've turned on every single company to date. Because one of the biggest things for me was just the integrity of me saying, I like this company because I want to say I like this company. Yeah. Not because in the current market space that someone's standing behind me and is giving me $500 to mention their name about I like this company. So that's why on my show, when I start my show, I've got a sponsored segment, and I say it's a sponsored segment. Everything else is I say it because I want to, not because someone else is paying me.
Yeah, I love that.
And this falls part a lot of that, the whole, you say the bullshit and the coaching. I've got a real dislike to the word coach. And to me, growing up as a kid and my dad coaching me majority of my sports, coach held such a high value of a word to me. I know kids that's still my age, in their mid to late 30s, in their 40s, that still call or go on social media and ask me, how's coach doing? Talking about my dad. And the society has killed that word, because, like, I totally agree. 20-year-olds, 25-year-olds going, oh, I'm a coach. Yeah. Sorry, don't get me started.
One last question. If something were to happen to you today, and you did have that moment of just what's next. Those probably that whole night, I can't even fathom to think of what your mind was all that night when you have to go to your doctor next day. So if something were to happen to you today, in a few words, how would you want to be remembered or described by your loved ones?
Someone that was silly, funny, caring, and had integrity, but I was always pushing the limit, because I was always seeking for more.
Yeah, and I think that's your natural entrepreneurial drive, right? I think one of the greatest characteristics of a true entrepreneur is that drive, that hustle, where you're never happy. That strive for perfection all the time.
Yeah, so here's a question, Jeff. I'll ask you a question back. Not to,
Yeah.
and it's a question I got asked around just recently, and it was, what is the one single item that you can purchase or own, or that you can have for you to say you've achieved it, you've achieved life? Do you have one item that if you got it tomorrow, you could walk away and go, I'm done, mic drop, no more Jeff?
Like a physical item that you would have to purchase?
No. So it doesn't have to be a physical item. This came about. I was speaking to another entrepreneur friend of mine. He said he had met a couple, and their life goal was to own the Christmas tree that you see in the big American malls. That's about 10 stories high, and if they could own one of those, their life they'd achieved everything they wanted to achieve in life. And he was like, Lawrence, what is that for you? And this is why I want to ask you to see, because I know your blood is very similar to my blood in what I thought.
So, okay, let me just break this down. So I don't have to physically buy it. It could be just something me visually seeing.
Yeah, it's something you're achieving, seeing.
My son's succeeding, because everything he's been through and everything from the day he came home from 4 months old till 13 years, every single day I spend 3-4 hours trying to better him. Whether it's mentally, spiritually, physically. A lot of it's physical. Like even yesterday, we spent 3.5 hours doing yoga and stretching to help improve something. So to me, being able to sit there one day when he's 19 or 20, and we've had all these goals, like so many goals, from baseball to running to him doing public speak, being able to sit there and see him at a high level and telling his story will make me feel like I've achieved everything I had. I was what I was meant to be. Like, I want to cry thinking about it, but that's my goal. That is truly, to me, that I could be like, he's in a good space. Because when he was born, me and my wife looked at ourselves. We got him home at 4 months old, and he was 4 months old. He was still 4.5 pounds. He fit in the palm of my hands at 4.5 months. And through that process, those 4 months in hospital, we were brought into a room 4 different times, and the doctors wanted to stop working on it for 4 times, and I refused it.
Yeah.
And I looked at my wife, and I remember saying to her, my biggest fear is waking up one day at 60, 65 years old, looking at my son in a wheelchair and being like, I didn't do everything I possibly could to give him the best opportunity. So that was my trigger point. And then we always said, when I started that passion and started that work with him, my mindset was always like, I wish I had a fast forward button. You never want to go ahead in life, but in my head, I wanted to be 10 years later and see where he was at 10 years old. And when we got to 10 years old, he was way past my expectations. So it was such a great feeling. So my mindset is, to me, once he gets to a certain level and I could sit there and be like, he's there, that'll be my prize, my award. That is something, my accomplishment. I've made it, kind of thing.
Yeah, that's awesome. Love that, brother.
What was your answer? Don't say it.
I didn't have one.
Don't say a Christmas tree. Oh, you didn't have one?
No, it was a funny one. I came home and spoke to my wife, and she said, Lawrence, I know you. Look, don't get me wrong. You know, my kid's grown up and having an amazing life, by all means, all of that. But she's like, you will never have that one tick box from a success, because your drive has always been too much of this is the next level, and then what's behind that.
Yeah, when it comes when it comes to business and stuff like that, I'm never happy.
Yeah.
Never happy. Never happy. I'm always looking for the next bar, the next thing to push, the next limit. And I'm always had the next idea. I just purchased the deal hasn't gone officially through. It's October 13th, but I just purchased a beautiful beach house with this pure, and the place needs to be a full rental. Yeah. And I love doing stuff myself. I'm a rental guy. So I'm actually going to, and I'm really into, I don't know if it is in New Zealand, but in Canada, there's so many rental shows like Fix Your Beach House or Scott's Vacation Homes and all. So now we're going to get a whole crew, and we're going to film the whole rentals and then release it on YouTube as a whole series of my rentals of this beach house. So we're going to do it. So it's like, I'm always trying to set the next level at something I do. Right. So I love that aspect. This has been an awesome conversation. I love it, Lawrence. I'm so glad we connected, and obviously we have a relationship through social media, but I'm sure the relationship will go a lot further now, and and looking forward to where it takes us and all that. Anything you want to leave our audience with?
I just think anyone that's this far down the show is still listening out here. First, I would say thank you, and listen to the story for both myself and Jeff. But one of the biggest things from my experience is don't plan life for 5 years or 10 years down the line. Jeff can tell you, from his experience as well, is we've got to make sure that the moment is here. The moment is now. You've also got to make sure you've got protection for tomorrow. I didn't have that. I didn't have protection when I ate my first hurdle. I do have that now. So think about that. Think about what is actually important and live it to the fullest. Enjoy the life, party away, have the fun, and then put the things on the side that will allow you each day to do those fun things. And that's another discussion another day. But yeah, just be the best you can for yourself and your family.
Love it. Thank you so much, brother.
Thank you so much, Jeff.